All right, welcome everyone. It's Tuesday. We're going to do a Rashi from the third Aliyah, a very tragic, sad Aliyah in the Parsha of Shmini. We looked a little bit yesterday at the second Aliyah. At the end of the second Aliyah, Aaron is saddened by the fact that seemingly all of the korbanos that he brings, all the service that he goes through is not accepted by Hashem. He's upset at the fact that he did everything Moshe had asked him to do. He followed all the instructions to a T, and Moshe's promise was that the fire of Hashem would descend upon the Mizbeach, or that the presence of Hashem would dwell in the Mishkan after everything that he had gone through, and it doesn't seem to happen. But Moshe saves the day. Moshe goes in with him to the Ohel Moed, as we saw yesterday, and they daven together. Moshe intercedes on behalf of Aaron, and Hashem indeed does come down into the Mishkan. They go out and they bless the people, and Vayar Kvod Hashem El Kol Ha'am. The end of the second Aliyah ends on a high. Moshe is the loving big brother that comes in to save the day. Aaron's kavod is resuscitated. Everything he did was worthwhile. The Kohanim are set to go. They're ready to start their service on the right foot. The inauguration ceremony is done, and everything is ready to proceed from there. And unfortunately, at the height of the Simcha, the tragedy occurs. And the tragedy occurs in the third Aliyah, as you can see from Debbie's background, with the death of Nadav and Avihu, the two sons of Aaron. The Aliyah begins actually on a positive note. Vateitze eish milifnei Hashem, vatochal al hamizbeach es ha'ulav es ha'chalavim, vayar kol ha'am vayaronu vayiplu al pneihem. The Aliyah starts with the word Vateitze eish milifnei Hashem, that a fire went out from Hashem and consumed all of the sacrifices that have been brought by the Kohanim on the Mizbeach, and all of the people, they fell on their faces, they prostrated themselves, they davened, they were all there for this major moment of acceptance by Hashem, right? This is a great moment, Vateitze eish, in the most positive sense. God's fire comes down and accepts all the sacrifices that were offered, and the people respond in kind by praying, by prostrating themselves, by accepting Hashem upon them. It's like a two-way relationship, right? The fire from Hashem, from the heavens, represents God's acceptance of the people. The people bowing down before Hashem represents the people's acceptance of God. There's this great, wonderful relationship. Everything is exactly how it is supposed to be. But then when you go to the next pasuk, Vayikchu b'nei Aaron, Nadav v'Avihu, ish machtaso, vayitnu b'hen eish, v'asimu aleim ketores, vayakrivu lifnei Hashem eish zara, asher lo siva usam. The two sons of Aaron, the sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, each take their own little fry pan, and they take some incense and they sacrifice it to Hashem with a fire on the Mizbeach. And this fire was considered Eish Zara, a foreign fire, which was not commanded. Now, in response to that, we have the exact same phrasing as we had in the first pasuk of the Aliyah. Once again, Vateitze eish milifnei Hashem. A fire comes down from the heavens, but this time, not a positive fire to consume the sacrifices, but Vatochal osam, vayamusu lifnei Hashem. It consumes them instead of the sacrifices. They become the sacrifices before Hashem. Notice the parallelism of Vateitze eish. It's hard to shift here, and Al HaTorah goes back the entire parak. Can't go back one pasuk. But the last pasuk was Vateitze eish, the exact same phrase. Vateitze eish in the good way, and then Vateitze eish in the bad way when it comes to consume them. The first Vateitze eish is the positive one. It consumes all the korbanos that were brought. The second Vateitze eish is the bad one, because Hashem consumes them themselves. They are the sacrifice. You'll notice, even we come back to this sometimes, the way the aliyahs are split versus the way the chapters are split. The chapters were done by the Christians, and the way that they split it, sometimes one pasuk off from the way we split our aliyahs or we split our parshios, and that split is very much indicative of our philosophy of where one thing ends and the other thing begins, as opposed to the common understanding. So it makes a lot of sense that the Christian chapter 9, Parak Tet, would end after pasuk Chaf Daled. It would end after Vateitze eish milifnei Hashem v'tochal al mizbeach es ha'ula es ha'chalavim yarkam v'yivru. God accepted all the sacrifices. This is the end of a chapter. This is the end of this whole section, which is all about the Miluim, all about the inauguration ceremony. And then, when you go to the next chapter, the beginning of chapter Yud, you have the sad story of Nadav and Avihu. That's the line of demarcation. But you'll notice that our Aliyah is actually are off by one pasuk. Shlishi begins with the last pasuk of Perek Tet, as opposed to the first pasuk of Perek Yud. The Shlishi Aliyah begins with Vatetze Eish in the good sense before it reaches the story of Nadav and Avihu. And I think our Aliyah does that. It's one pasuk off, even though logically you would end the Perek right here, exactly where the Christians do. But we end our Aliyah over here, and we start the third Aliyah with Vatetze Eish, exactly because of this parallelism. Chazal wanted to have Vatetze Eish in the good sense, in the way it is supposed to be, and Vatetze Eish in the bad sense, in the way it is not supposed to be together as part of the same story, as opposed to split into two different ones. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, back to our Aliyah here. This is the third Aliyah. We're talking about the death of Nadav and Avihu. I was just situating us in terms of the story and the parallelism of Vatetze Eish. This is a tragic episode. It's an episode that's hard to understand, although everybody tries to understand a little bit why it occurred. What was the great, grievous mistake of Nadav and Avihu of bringing this Eish Zara, this incense offering before Hashem? And what does the Torah mean by Eish Zara, a foreign fire? Sardi Machlukis Tanaim, a foreign fire. Was it foreign because it was a fire they brought to the Mizbeach, as opposed to using the fire on the Mizbeach, on the altar? Or was it a fire that was Zara, that was strange, because despite the fact that it was on the Mizbeach, it was the correct fire, it was used in an incorrect way. So that's already a Machlukis. What is Eish Zara? But again, the broader Machlukis here is what was wrong with them bringing this Ketoras, this incense sacrifice. What exactly does Hashem mean when he says, "Vayomer Moshe el Aaron, hu asher diber Hashem leimor, bikrovai ekadesh ve'apnei kol ha'am ekabed vayidom Aaron"? What does it mean, bikrovai ekadesh, to the holy ones, to my closest ones, I am sanctified? Meaning Nadav and Avihu were sacrifices to me. They were the holiest of people. They were the closest of people, and I am sanctified through them. So question number one, what exactly did they do wrong? Question number two, what does Hashem mean, Bikrovai Kadesh? And of course, question number three, Vayidam Aaron. How exactly was Aaron silent in the face of this unbelievably difficult tragedy? Many, many layers of questions, even in addition to those three. And it's hard to cover all of those in such a short shiur. We're already almost out of time. But I'll just share with you one Rashi, since that's the point of us gathering, is to read the Rashis. Rashi takes a stab at trying to understand what the mistake of Nadav and Avihu was that is cause for such severe punishment over here of them being killed on this celebratory, wonderful, amazing day at the beginning of their job as Kohanim in the Mishkan. Vatetze Eish. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, he quotes a machlokas from the Mishnah, from the Medrash. Rabbi Eliezer says, "Lo mesu b'nei Aaron el b'pnei shehoru halacha b'fnei Moshe Rabban." Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is that the reason they died is because they taught a halacha in front of Moshe Rabbeinu, who was their Rebbe. Rabbi Shmuel Omer Shesui Yayin Nichnasu Lamikdash. Rabbi Shmuel is the more common understanding, which is that they were drunk when they came to offer their sacrifices. There was nothing wrong in them coming in, nothing wrong in them offering this, or perhaps there was something wrong in them offering this, but not wrong enough to warrant this severe a punishment. But what warranted the severest of punishments was because they sacrificed, they engaged in the avoda while they were drunk. And Rashi, of course, gets that from the fact that right after this incident, the Torah warns Kohanim not to go into the Mikdash drunk, Shesuye Yain, etc. But the first one is what interests me. The first one, opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, which is that they were Hora Halacha Bifnei Moshe Rabban. The severity of this punishment comes because they taught a halacha in front of their Rebbe, their teacher. And there's great passages about this in the Gemara Maseches Eruvin. Those who did Daf Yomi know that we went through those passages about how it's usher, it's forbidden to teach a halacha in front of your teacher. And it depends, is your teacher alive? Is your teacher not alive? Are you in their locale? Are you not in their locale? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The reason this interpretation struck me, even though there's a deficiency in this interpretation, which is that the severity of the punishment doesn't really match that crime of being more a halacha bifnei rabba, right? It seems quite a severe punishment for that kind of crime. But there's something else that I find appealing, so to speak, about this explanation. And that is that the form of the punishment really matches the form of the crime, midah keneged midah. If the crime was that they violated a hierarchy of the way the halachic system was supposed to be, they violated the hierarchy of teacher and student, the respect that they're supposed to have, that explanation really fits the way that this crime occurred, because they trespassed into the mikdash, bringing a fire, bringing a sacrifice, a ketores that hadn't been commanded. In a sense, the coming into that space of Hashem is also a violation of that hierarchy. You're only supposed to go into the Kodesh HaKodeshim certain times a year, once a year, only by the Kohen Gadol. There's a certain reverence for the space. There's a certain hierarchy of rules that this is supposed to happen before this is supposed to happen. This is supposed to happen now and not then. There's a certain respect for hierarchy, for rules that is supposed to occur in this space. When they violated and entered that space, they crushed that hierarchy. They showed disrespect for that hierarchy. So when we overlay some of the reasons why the punishment might have been so severe, or why the punishment might have happened, what appeals to me about Rabbi Eliezer is he overlays a reason which fits exactly the nature of the pshat in the psukim, which is the breaking of this hierarchy. Just like they broke the hierarchy in coming to the mikdash, so too maybe they broke the hierarchy in terms of more halacha bifnei rabban, teaching a halacha in front of their teachers. So much more to say, but we'll leave it for the moment. Wish you all.
I'd like to just really quickly mention that my great teacher